In what appears to be the first step towards de-escalation of tension, Russia said it was pulling back some of its troops near the Ukrainian border to their bases. The development comes after a flurry of diplomatic meetings and a grim warning from the US of a distinct possibility that Russia will invade Ukraine within days. While Ukraine has welcomed the development cautiously, a spokesperson for Kremlin has said the withdrawal of some forces was planned and will continue to move troops as it sees fit. Now, this is seen as the worst crisis between Russia and the West since the end of the Cold War, a crisis that has the world at the edge of their seat. But what is this conflict about? Is it really touted to be the next World War? What happens next? And more importantly, what about India? Should India be concerned about these developments? Well, Abhijit Iyer Mitra, geopolitical affairs analyst and a senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, join us. Thanks so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on our show. I just want to break this down for our viewers because there are a lot of messy, intertangled and diplomatic ties here at stake. But for our viewers, just to begin with, why should India care about what is happening in Russia and Ukraine?
Thanks, Aarti. The most important reason why India should care is that first and most importantly, the sanctions that could be applied on Russia if Russia decides to go ahead with the invasion. I don't think that is going to happen, though though what you see as a de-escalation today, I think is quite illusory. There are still large number of troops and normal troop movements. If you remember during Operation Parakram after the parliament attack, we went on rotating troops as well. This is more of a troop rotation than it is a de-escalation. The problem is when sanctions are imposed, India, because it gets some energy and a lot of our weapons from Russia, will have to be extremely concerned about how we get those weapons, how we pay for those weapons, etc., etc. This is number one. Number two is more at a philosophical level. Remember, what is happening in terms of Russia and the ethnic Russians east of the Dnieper in Ukraine is pretty much the same ethnocentric grounds on which Pakistan invaded Kashmir. Now, remember, the same countries that are screaming out loud saying Russia can't do this have been ignoring everything that Pakistan does to India in Kashmir on those same ethnocentric grounds, and in fact normalizing it and equating the two of us. So it affects us in a lot of ways. The question is, there are opportunities and there are dangers. It depends on what we make of it.
Mm-hmm. Abhijit, you touched on this briefly, but just as a deep dive into this, Russia's claim over Ukraine, Russia's claim over certain parts of Ukraine, break this down for us. Where does this stem from? What is the basis of this claim?
All right. Now, look, Ukraine is sort of the cradle of Russian civilization, if you have it. The first Russia, Kievan Rus, was created by Vikings in Kiev. The problem is after the Mongol invasion, the Russian identity splits into three: Russia, White Russia, and Little Russia. So Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, Ukraine being Little Russia. And in all of this, what happens is you see a constant change of territories between the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth on the one hand and the Tsardom of Russia on the other. Till finally, by the 1600s, Tsarist Russia is in absolute pinnacle of its power. By the late 1600s, early 1700s, after the Polish invasions and things like that. And what you find is that the actual core of what we understand to be Ukraine is actually very, very small, less than 10% of modern Ukrainian territory. Most of the territory to the west of the Dnieper was added to it by Russian Tsars. A lot of it is, in fact, Eastern Poland. Stalin adds still more, because if you look at Poland between 1917 and 1940, about 60% of Poland was actually in what is today Western Ukraine, which Stalin then changes over and he pushes Ukraine further west. Most of what is Poland today was, in fact, far Eastern Germany and Ducal Prussia. So, communists tend to do this. They tend to play around with populations, create population divides and things like that. The Crimea was gifted to Ukraine by Khrushchev, who was a Ukrainian himself. You look at everything east of the Dnieper, the southern port of Odessa, right up to, Donetsk and things like this. It was, just gifted to the Ukrainian SSR by Lenin. And there are southern territories which are again annexed to Ukraine by Stalin. So most of what you see isn't natural organic borders. They were very carefully thought out political borders, like, say, the former Yugoslavia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Nagorno-Karabakh, which were meant to be time bombs. They were meant to be ethnic time bombs that went off to create a kind of conflict, which means that then the same latent forces, be it communist or deep state, could come back to power. So we're seeing the result of these time bombs planted during the period of the USSR today. The problem now is, east of the Dnieper is either majority Russian or huge, significant Russian populations. And that's almost half of Ukrainian territory. What we've also seen is that Russian population is constantly being threatened by Ukrainian nationalism. Remember, there was Stepan Bandera, who was part of the German, they collaborated with the German army and used to go around killing Russians and communists. The so-called Ukrainian nationalist forces today have an extremely deep and dangerous connection with their Nazi past. So it's an accumulation of events coming to haunt Russia. And Russia has always understood that anybody who has invaded Ukraine has ultimately invaded Russia. It is an immutable rule. So they have pretty much drawn, a red line, a Lakshman Rekha, what have you, and said, thus far and no further. Ukraine is simply not joining. But let's be clear. Ukraine does not qualify for NATO membership. On not one of the criteria does it qualify for NATO membership. What has been happening is Ukraine has a horribly corrupt government. Yeah. Their economy is in the doldrums. And every president, including Zelensky, who claimed to be Mr. Clean, his name appeared on the Panama Papers. Yeah. They all think, poking the Russian bear is a fantastic way of diverting from problems back home. Yeah. And this has been a consistent pattern we've seen, where irresponsible politicians, instead of trying to calm the situation down, are deliberately trying to aggravate it unnecessarily, so, knowing full well you cannot join NATO. And the problem with Biden is his own, abysmal ratings right now.
Abhijit, in fact, I just wanted to ask you about the US, and if you'll just allow me to interject a little, sure. Because the US role in all of this also needs to be spoken of. But as you were saying, the corrupt ruler in Ukraine, I think corruption is the universal truth that unites politicians from across the world. But the other thing, conflicts across the world also have an American hand somewhere in it. As far as this crisis is concerned, Russia keeps insisting that the US and America has been fueling this war talk, and there isn't much to it. They've put the blame on America for this warmongering.
Which is 100% accurate. Because think of it from Biden's point of view. Your popularity is popularity and ratings are plummeting. They're rock bottom. They're worse than Trump ever was. And you desperately need a foreign diversion of some sort. If not, you can claim that the entire threat was a great success because it deterred Russia from invading. Right, so he will claim victory irrespective. We either deterred a Russian invasion or I told you a Russian invasion was imminent. So this is something that the Biden administration will do. The problem here is, look at the toll it has taken on Ukrainian trust. The Ukrainians are flabbergasted because they're thinking, we expected America to A, come and protect us, or if things got out of hand, to dampen tensions down. Instead, America is neither protecting us, and they are exacerbating tensions, which is leading to as it is, our economy is in a bad state. Here, the panic is leading to even more economic instability. Ultimately, what's going to happen is you're going to see Putin, who keeps notching up or notching down the temperature at the borders, the military at the borders. And Ukraine, either Ukraine or NATO, most probably Ukraine, will feel that it's got absolutely no friends and sign some kind of a bilateral treaty with Russia, saying, they're not going to join NATO. Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly what Putin is playing for right now.
Abhijit, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. Geopolitical expert there, Abhijit Iyer Mitra. Thanks so much. We hope to have you again